Hi. I thought I would just quickly go over these questions for the final exam and just give you a couple of concluding remarks with regard to the course, just to make sure you're on the right track and that I'm answering each and every one of your questions. So, you have posted to Moodle now the final exam, which covers Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, right? Three questions on each figure. The questions, I'm trying to make them as straightforward as possible, but again, as has been the case all semester, they frequently ask you to do a couple of things while answering them. So the trick is to answer these questions fully and to make sure that you break them down into their constituent parts. So I'm going to see if I can't point you in the right direction with that. The other thing to note is that well, you've probably done the math for this course. Each of these questions are graded out of 5 points for a total of 30 points. In the exam, it is worth 30% of your final grade. So each and every one of these questions are worth 5% of your final grade, right? As such, the 3 to 5 sentence responses probably aren't garnering you, if that's what you're doing, the kind of grades that you're looking for. So that's a signal to you that you should probably expand your answers somewhat. Right? So, the first three questions here, the first one relates to that big, ugly passage that I harped on in the video and Roderick harped on in the video, and I'll just read it here. Discuss the following passage. A human being is spirit, but what is spirit? Spirit is the self, but what is the self? The self is a relation that relates itself to itself, or is the relations relating itself to itself in the relation. The self is not the relation, but the relations relating itself to itself. A human being is a synthesis of the infinite and the finite, the temporal and the eternal, of freedom and necessity. In short, a synthesis. A synthesis is a relation between two, and considered in this way, a human being is still not a self. Now, I'm the first to admit that this is a big, ugly passage, right? And my apologies for that. But there should be some hard theorists in this course, right? So, what I'm asking you to do with this question is to just simply and straightforwardly discuss this passage in your own words. Your best response is going to come from just kind of breaking it down into its constituent parts and trying to, in the end, sort of gloss an overview of what the heck Kierkegaard could be talking about, right? Roderick gives you some background on this, and I did in the video as well. So those should be good resources, but really the best way. And I remember the first time I encountered this passage, right? It's, I think earlier in the class I said, "Do you see this hairline? That comes from what the hell is this guy talking about?" So it's a difficult passage, but your best response will probably come from those two sources, plus sitting down and just thinking about it, right, on your own. So what I'm looking for is your own words here, right? The second question asks you to discuss 1, 2, 3 distinct types of despair, which are in the title of this section. So they're right there for you, right? Basically, I'm asking you to describe each of these types of despair and discuss how despair, by Kierkegaard's estimation, can be seen to be a good thing, at least in its potential. Right, so I believe that was the third page of the section that he actually lays out that argument for you. So that's going to point you in the right direction there. Now, finally, for Kierkegaard, this is sort of an interesting point that I was trying to. So I'll just take a second to tell you what I was trying to do by lining up these two proto-existentialists next to one another. One is a very Christian existentialist, and the other is very famous for claiming that God is dead. Right? So, by putting these existentialists side by side, what I was trying to show you is that in terms of religious existentialism, either you passionately have faith in some sort of deity, faith is the key here, right? Or not. Well, in either case, you're existentially in essentially the same position, right? Now, this question, well, it reads, Kierkegaard in his discussion by that name describes despair as sin. In what sense is this the case? So what I'm looking for you to do is just basically provide an analysis of that particular section entitled Despair is Sin, right? So it's the other point that I want to make here, because it came up a bit in the discussion forums, is that Kierkegaard is an interesting fellow. I bring him in because he's an example of religious existentialism, and he's got probably the most mature discussion of faith in the existential tradition, right? So I find that discussion incredibly interesting. But Kierkegaard himself actually explicitly at a couple of points argues that his specific brand of Christianity, right, is going to be the one that is going to give one the best possible existential situation. Right? So he explicitly argues this. Now, for my purposes, right, in bringing this in, what I'm looking for from Kierkegaard is just a general discussion of faith, and his use of sin is rather particular, right? So an analysis of that, right? So the key with these philosophers is not that we actually buy their position, right? I'm not trying to convert you to a particular existential kind of Christianity, especially by bringing Nietzsche in after, but rather taking a look at the insights that can evolve out of these positions and taking a look at some of the possible ways to criticize the position itself, right? So, so basically I'm asking you to analyze the idea of despair as sin. And I should say that each and every one of these questions actually relates back to that sort of introductory passage, right? All the tools that you need are in this "the human being is spirit, but what is spirit, da-da kind of passage. So if you're able to provide a good analysis of that, everything else should sort of follow, right? Now, the second section that we're looking at here is Nietzsche from Twilight of the Idols. And you have the portable Nietzsche, right? That's your copy of Twilight of the Idols. I'm noticing here I didn't give you page references, so I'll do that now. In the first, well, question 4 on your exam sheet, but the first question on Nietzsche, it reads, Nietzsche's criticism of Socrates. It's interesting how Socrates comes up at the end of the course. He was at the beginning. He describes the hypertrophy of the logical faculty and that sarcasm of the radic which distinguishes him. That passage comes from your page 475. All right? And what you're supposed to do is, well, first off, when I give you a passage like that, you should provide a brief analysis of the passage. What the heck is Nietzsche talking about with the hypertrophy of the logical faculty and that sarcasm of the radic which distinguishes him? Which is a fancy way of saying that Socrates is insanely rational, hyper-rational, hyper-logical, and extremely sarcastic, right? Which Nietzsche lays into at different points, and which we looked at in our treatment of Socrates. So analyze that point. Just tell me what Nietzsche's talking about. And then, with the second part of the question, discuss how Nietzsche presents these qualities as signs of decline. And his argument to that effect is over the next 2 pages. Right? So it's about 3 pages of text that I'm asking you to analyze there. So should be reasonably straightforward. Now, question 5 here has to do with one of the idiosyncrasies that was discussed in that section, Reason and Philosophy, where Nietzsche is quite critical of philosophical rationality and more or less argues that philosophers throughout the ages have had things more or less arse backwards, right? So we'll take a look at that. The passage itself comes from page 481.